Now I want to love this, I really do. They've gone for it, and I think will change the gimbal industry. It's like you're so close. Drop the ball on this one. But that is my problem, not yours. Typically speaking, there's really not that much difference between each of these new gimbals or stabilizers that come out, but Zhiyun have done something a little bit different here. In this video, we'll go through the main specs, the shooting modes including stabilization quality, accessories that I would recommend, and the benefits and drawbacks that may make you go with this gimbal or stick with your current one. Now we'll start this off with the info that you need, but don't necessarily care too much about as long as it fits your needs. So we'll buzz through it pretty quickly, and that's the main specs. So battery life, you're looking at about 9 hours, which really is all you need for a shoot, and the fast charging capability that charges the full battery in an hour and just over an hour and a half, 1.6 hours, should do you enough for a full day as well. Then the payload is up to 3 kilograms, which is going to cover most of your pretty hefty size cameras like the A7S III and a Sony or a Sigma 24-70, which is what I've been using. Then we come over to the weight, which is 1.47 kilograms, not to be specific at all. Now the price comes in at a little more expensive than its competitors, and throughout this video you may understand why, but that comes in at $549. Two of those reasons that you may see that increase in price is the fact that it's got a built-in focus wheel and the 2.88-inch full color monitor. Now I love what they've tried to do, but it's not quite there. Now what other gimbal or stabilizer out there really competes with this one? The DJI Ronin SC2. Now I'm pretty pumped to let you in on a little bit of a secret. We'll do this, come close. DJI saw some of my previous Ronin SC2 videos and have asked me to make a couple of more videos comparing it to the Weebill 2 and a couple of other videos too, so expect those within the next month. I'm back. Shooting modes. So first up is pan follow mode. This is going to limit your movement just to panning left and panning right, which is going to give you a level horizon, so it's going to limit you from being able to pan up and down. But this is perfect for following a subject in a straight line. If you're following behind them, it'll allow you to get a really clean shot. Then we have lock mode, which is a very restrictive type of movement, locks all of the axes, and well, in my 4 or 5 years of using gimbals, I've never used this mode. But it's great for if you're walking straight down corridors or hallways or straight down a pathway to get that clean shot without any kind of tilt up, down, left, or right. Which brings me on to follow mode, which is a less restrictive version of pan follow. And this is probably one of the more useful modes for tracking a person, because they could be going up steps in which you need to tilt up or down. It gives you a better option to be able to actually follow that person properly. Speaking of each to their own, you then have FOV style, which is like FPV style. It's a super creative mode, and honestly, I don't think you'll be finding yourself using it that much and really wanting to use it that much. It's going to give you a really unique shot, but it's not one that people are very familiar with, and depending on your work, if you're established or not, people may think it just looks unprofessional. But use it with confidence. Third to last, we have portrait mode. Is there really much I need to say about that? Other than the fact that, like the RSC2 from DJI, the thumbstick, the little toggle here, becomes unusable when it's in this mode. I quite like to see some movement when I'm in portrait mode, but it's quite restrictive. But still, being able to get into portrait mode with a single touch of a button is great to have on these new gimbals. Especially with the uprise of Instagram Reels, TikTok. If you're not on TikTok or Reels, you're missing out on a huge opportunity for growth. That's another story. And of course, if you're looking for more content, you could also follow me on TikTok or Instagram. Penultimately, we have Go mode, which is basically sport mode, isn't it? Just the reactions of the gimbal, the movements are that much faster to be able to move and capture whatever kind of fast movement you've got going on, whether that's football, racing cars, anything. Then finally, you have vortex mode, which is my favorite thing about all of these gimbals. This kind of shot, that 360 rotating shot, is just something that is near impossible to get without a gimbal. And these things make it so easy, and I think the type of shot you can get holds so much like attitude, characteristic, charisma. Now we get onto hand positioning. So a little bit of a mix up with the RSC2 when that came out, but you've got two main modes, and one of them you're kind of forced into. So you've got your normal handle type mode where you're just holding it normally. Next one is your briefcase mode, where you're removing the tripod legs and putting them on the actual gimbal itself. Or if you've got another handle, stick that on. And then you get into portrait mode, and your only option really is to go into briefcase mode, since in portrait mode, the camera sticks directly up and doesn't give you much of an option. So you're kind of forced into briefcase mode whether you like it or not. But whether you like it or not, here are some accessories that I would highly recommend. First off is a handle, as we just talked about. Throughout all of my gimbals, I've always opted to have a handle. Like here is my RSC2. We've got a pot handle here that rotates. And to be quite honest, with the weight of these gimbals, I mean, 1.47 kilograms plus, let's say 3 kilograms on top isn't crazy, but if you're holding this all day, you're gonna want to set it down at any opportunity. And having to remove the legs from being positioned up here is probably not what you want to be doing. Unless you get yourself some of these trans mounts. It's like a quick release plate, so you get 2 of these trans mounts, and you would stick one down here and another one here, and that's gonna allow you to really easy transition from the tripod legs up to the top here. Now, I think that's a better longer term option than getting the handle. Again, up to you. Now, the last accessory that I'm going to suggest is really kind of essential to this gimbal in itself. Because of the new slide out monitor, that means you're really not going to have to attach an external monitor to your gimbal. But if you actually want to transmit the video from your camera to that monitor, you need to be buying the transmission system, which is an extra couple of bob on top. But really, if you don't have that, the screen's nice and everything, but it's also just a big screen for a small menu system. Kind of a waste. All right, that was a bit of a Debbie Downer. So let's get on to some of the benefits that I see in this gimbal and I think will change the gimbal industry. Of course, the screen in itself, but only if you have the transmission system. I did also notice as well that when you slide the screen in, the design is actually really cool. But once you slide the screen in, it shuts off automatically, so it's not going to be using all of that battery up, and it's going to be preserving that battery for you. Next up, the locking mechanisms on this have definitely improved. On the Weebill S, they were kind of finicky. You weren't sure if you had it locked. These are much better and make you feel like you really have the lock in place. I guess the final thing that I really do like about this is that you now have the battery built into the gimbal and not having to take the batteries out, charge them separately. Although that had its own flexibility of being able to have multiple sets of batteries to stay on the go for long periods of time. But I think from the time-to-time use, this makes it much easier to actually play around with. Which kind of brings me on to that being a negative and going into the drawbacks. It's the same across a lot of the newer gimbals, that the batteries are built in so that once that battery dies, you can't change it. You just have to change your gimbal. Now, I want to love this, I really do. You have to have the transmission system to actually transmit video from the camera to the monitor. Why is that an addition? Why do we have this big monitor there as a flip out screen to be able to see what the camera's seeing and have to have an additional add-on? It seems counterintuitive. And now we're on to button positioning, and I love what they've tried to do here, but how on earth is anyone gonna be able to manage that, let alone left-handed people? Like, just give you a quick run through. If I'm holding my gimbal like this, one-handed, I'm using the knuckle of my thumb here to hit the record button, and then to try and move this dial in here is incredibly awkward. I just like, it's kind of, they've gone for it, just haven't really nailed it, you know? It's like you're so close, just too far. And then for a left-handed, you've got no chance. Yeah, you can't do that. Again, it looks sleek. I see what they've tried to do, but I had a couple of issues. It took me a long time to actually get the right cable to connect, and I had to change some settings in my Sony settings. But I also couldn't get the focus wheel to adjust like aperture, ISO, shutter speed that it's meant to be able to do. I don't know if that's going to come out in another firmware update, but I legitimately spent over 30 minutes trying to work it out. Couldn't get it. But the focus wheel can control the roll, which is kind of cool, and the focus motor. Having said that, you do need a second hand to be able to control the focus wheel, which you might say you should be having a second hand to control the focus wheel to get things perfect. I'm just saying. Second to last of the pure negativity, and I'm sorry. I do love it. I just wish there's a little bit more thought that had gone into this. If you want to attach a monitor or anything extra to this, your only option is off of the right side of the gimbal. So most people being right-handed, you're looking across yourself to see what's going on the monitor over here, unless you have the transmission system, in which case you could see it right here. It's also a tiny screen. And finally, DJI managed this so well, but Zhiyun just, in my opinion, dropped the ball on this one. One of the amazing things I love about the DJI Ronin SC2 is the quick release plate and the quick releasing of the slider plate. For the Zhiyun, you will need a multi-tool or something to make sure you're screwing on or unscrewing the plates properly. Yeah, like I wish we could just release these two from each other without having to use some kind of tool, screwdriver, 10p piece. Then I need another screw to get that one out, which makes the comparison of these two gimbals that much more difficult because I have to switch out the plates every time. But that is my problem, not yours. Now I will say one of the biggest internal improvements for the Zhiyun, in this case for the Weebill 2, is that you can change the parameter settings on the gimbal rather than having to open the app and go and change them that way. It was always I found it not very intuitive to go into the app and change those settings, but now that's all on the monitor and a very sensitive touchscreen, I have to say. That's a big win. So in the coming weeks, look out for a full review of the RSC2, the DJI RSC2, and the Weebill 2 head-to-head. We'll look at the different stabilization and a couple of the other features built in across different videos. So if you're interested in that, consider subscribing. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.